Look, what's always interesting to me is I've been recruiting security folks for like 16 years now, dating myself. And what's always interesting to me when you come to the conferences and there's so much technical discussion and there's so much great content. I mean, attacks, new technologies, you see that all. But as security pros, we spend a lot of time like working in our careers, and we don't really spend a lot of time working on our careers. And no matter how talented you are or how bright you are, at some point in time you're going to go to work for a living. And you're going to face yourself in a situation where you're interviewing for an opportunity that you're trying to figure out if you like it or not. You're trying to figure out, does this work for you? Does it not work for you? And no matter how many certifications or how much training that you have, nothing will really prepare you for those short moments in your life when your performance and your connection and your interaction during those interview processes and those recruitment processes will truly have a bigger outcome than almost anything that you deal with career-wise. Because good talent. As professionals, we have the laws of supply and demand on our side. At the same point in time, that comes with a lot of burden because you have to make good decisions. And so a lot of times when we do panels and we have discussions about this, I really want to encourage more interaction with the group, to ask questions, to maybe provide some of your own experiences so that the group can learn from each other, so you can have a better understanding of what others go through. Maybe you can learn from those experiences. We're very fortunate here to have two panelists from leading technology companies. Linda Greco, raise your hand, Linda. And she's a recruiter with EMC and the RSA, the security division, and Mark Knowlton, who's a senior recruiter over at Akamai. And through the presentation, both Linda and Mark will have the ability to kind of tell you guys a little bit about what they're doing, some of the interesting things that are happening at their company. But more importantly, they'll give you an insight to kind of how they look at talent, how they manage those processes, the things that they see that you don't see. How do they deal with compensation? How do they deal with the recruitment process from submission to closure? So that you guys can actually get some real hardcore information about the things that you generally don't see. So hopefully if you take something away from this presentation and Source, this might be something that you can take away and put in your own back pocket and apply someplace down the road. So let me just let Linda and Mark introduce themselves. I think that's probably a good place to start. That's Mark.
Thanks a lot, Lee. Is this working?
No?
I did put it up.
Okay.
How about now?
Oh, great.
Okay, good.
Eureka.
Thanks very much, Lee. I've been with Akamai just under 2 years, and I've been in the business for 16 years and have seen quite a few changes in the marketplace. The talent is much more aware that they are very much in demand, but that can be a double-edged sword. When Lee was talking about the whole compensation thing, a lot of times a person's perception of what they're worth in the marketplace isn't a real reflection of what they're actually worth at a particular company. And so I'd love to be able to discuss in greater length what some of those challenges we might encounter. But in terms of Akamai, we look for, of course, really smart people, but not necessarily folks whose resumes look like an alphabet soup of acronyms. So we'll discuss at greater length more about the kind of people we look for, and not necessarily someone who fits a parochial model. We just look for smart, talented people who think on their feet and like to be around smart people doing things that are really, really meaningful. When we push 1/3 of all the traffic on the web at any given day, the stuff that we do matters to a lot of people. And so we like to find people who are passionate about doing something that has that big of an impact. and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk later today. We have an open hour after this session, and we're hosting a beer and wine reception later. So I'm more than open to have a more detailed conversation about some of the stuff we're doing.
Hi, I'm Linda Greco. Nice to meet all of you. I've been with RSA since July. I've been with EMC for 3 years, and I've been a recruiter for over 20 years. So that's a little bit about my background. I was a software engineer before I became a recruiter, so I talk techie, but I don't write techie. So that's who I am. RSA, what can we say about RSA? So overall, EMC, 85 countries, over 60,000 employees, making IT as a service, right? Storage, manage, protect, as well as analyze data for our clients. We purchased RSA, how lucky and good fortune for us, in 2006, and RSA has grown to about 2,800 employees, 800 of which are headquartered here in Massachusetts, Bedford, Massachusetts. So I'm sure you're familiar with RSA, but we're dealing with security, risk, and compliance. We're dealing with how we can use big data as a solution to security. And I'm sure if you haven't had an opportunity to hear Art Coviello speak at the RSA conference, that was just a few months back in California, I highly recommend listening to that presentation. It's enlightening. RSA, absolutely, we're hiring. We're always hiring. We have currently today about 200 open positions, 100 of which are in our Bedford facility. We're in 60 countries, so we really do keep ourselves on the pulse of being a global security company. If you want to discuss anything with regard to position, opportunity, salary as well, a lot of times the one thing that people need to keep in mind is that they're always looking for a certain dollar value, and with that you need to understand that you need to perform at that level. So understanding what your value is very important, and also surrounding yourself with a level of intelligence where you can not only share information but gain more information is also key to a successful growth professionally. So that's always something that you want to keep in mind is who am I going to be working with, what kind of work am I going to be doing, what am I going to be able to contribute, and will I be able to contribute at that value level, but also what are you going to continuously be learning?
It's pretty comprehensive. We have two very esteemed companies here. And, you know, one of the nice things about being a security pro is that you get to pick from every one of them. And I guess one of the things that, you know, is probably, you know, in this competitive market, it'd be a very good question to ask you guys, how do you guys win? In other words, when you have a candidate walks in the door and they're looking at Veracode and Akamai and EMC and Accenture or whomever it might be out there, right? How do you guys win? In other words, why should people come to work at, because we've just both said that, you know, don't ask for any money. But what we've said is basically is that, but why should they come to work at your companies? Not so much, you know, not so much specifically about your company, but more so about why. What do you think are good decision-making factors for people to consider when making a broad choice? Mark?
Well, it's funny. A lot of times, because of our reputation of having this powerful global technology that can be an intimidating place to work, especially because there's so many smart people. But talking with some of the InfoSec guys, and some of the things that attracted them was it's an environment where they're encouraged to ask questions and maybe admit that there's something that they don't know. And the way the group looks at it is not to look down on someone who knows less than them. They are glad that they asked the question, filled the knowledge gap, and the person who's filling that gap feels good about their contribution to the elevation of the team's overall knowledge about.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
So you could probably say the same thing about 100 different companies. In other words, every company, right? And I'm going to now wear my recruiting to the world hat, right? And we've represented, like, I don't know, 100, 150 of different types of technology vendors and that type of stuff along my tenure, right? But every internal recruiting function comes with the same story. We're best, we're going to be the biggest, we're going to win, we're going to dominate. Of course they have to feel that way. So everybody, all these like esoteric things about like, we're going to be more employee friendly. How how does somebody in the audience measure that? In other words, how do they measure that in the 30 minutes that they have of interviewing with somebody besides just trust me? Because they're going to trust you, Linda, just like they're trusting Mark. So in other words, you have a zero-sum transaction. So,
well, when you look at the scope of what we do, and given the fact that at any point in the day we're pushing 1/3 of all the traffic on the web, literally every person who logs in on the internet is going to talk to us. Based on the fact that the amount of volume that we're caching on the web means we are literally keeping the internet from cratering because of all the packets just flew freely from client, peer to peer without any, any medium in the middle to keep all that traffic from flying. And we perform at a level that's just you're not going to encounter in most.
And that's great, but everybody has a good widget. So in other words, like when I'm trying, maybe Linda can help.
Mark, can you try to make sure your mic's actually on? We're not sure if you're coming through
Well,
the mic or...
Hi. Hi. Yeah, it's working. So you're right. Every company has amazing things to offer. Certainly we do. And our reputation should precede you, which is what generated the interest as to why you wanted to come in for an interview with the company that you're interviewing for. But quite honestly, what feels right for you? That's what you want to determine. When you go in for an interview, what feels right for you? Learn about where have they come from, the person that you've interviewed. How have they professionally grown within the company? So you meet with Tom Heiser, and he's been with the company since 1984 as one of our first interns. How did he get that job? How? Because he went through a snowstorm where no one else showed up. He did something uniquely different that made him a standout. How he got hired. Now he's the president of the RSA company since 1984. It's the only job he's ever had. So what kind of promotional growth do you have? What kind of professional growth do you have as a working professional? Where is this company going to take you in the next 2 years, 3 years? So those are the things that you want to think about when you're interviewing. When you're meeting with these people, you spend more time with the people you work with and the people you love. You got to love the people you work with. Love what you do and love the people that you're surrounded with. So know that what you're going to learn from them. What are you going to contribute? It's just as much, it's a two-way interview process. What feels right for you? If it feels right for you, the job is right for you.
Yeah, I think these are both very good points. I mean, I think that, considering the company's business and considering, what works for you, and where that alignment is. One of the things I'll tell people all the time is that you have to start thinking about the criteria of things that are important to you, and you have to start ranking them. And, people change jobs, or they accept jobs, or go to workplaces for a whole slew of different reasons. And sometimes where somebody is in their life will dictate that. So I always tell people that you have to really, truly be honest with yourself. And you have to be able to pick environments that you can succeed in and things that align with where you are. I always say this, is that I was willing to do more things work-wise when I was a 20-something and 30-something as opposed to now that I'm in my 40s. Just because my life's in a different place. Some people will commute more, some people will travel more, some people will work more hours. So the one thing I always tell people is that you have to think about the things that are core to you, because like Linda said, is that you're going to be with this place, in security you're not going to be only there 40 hours a week, that's just not realistic, but you're going to be in a place 45, 50 hours a week. You're going to have to enjoy what that is, and that's going to have to provide you with some sort of work-life balance that works for you, whatever that might be. Has anybody here made a job decision recently, like a change? Tara?
Not necessarily change, but I resonated with what Linda was saying, because I interviewed for the position. They sounded wonderful, and I like lots of growth in the company. I was on the pathway heading back, not feeling really excited about it. And when the managing director got back to me and said, there's been a delay in the process, I found I was relieved. So even though on paper it sounded great, I wasn't crazy about it. It's hard to define exactly why.
Well, let me ask you a question. Here's great. So I wasn't even thinking about this. What do you guys think of job descriptions? Right? I mean, so here's this. What goes into writing a job description? Because there's a lot of stuff on that paper, and it looks like, oh God, I'm excellent. I can do this. I can do that. I can do that. And it's like, I can't even get an interview. So what goes into like your thought processes of writing job descriptions or helping the hiring managers write the job descriptions, and then B, what then makes the determination of why somebody gets to interview or versus why somebody doesn't get to interview? You want to take that, Mark?
Sure, like answer that from two perspectives. That I've been in a lot of places, both on the company side and the agency side, and the reality is that most companies, producing a job description is regarded as a painful rote exercise where copy and paste is the manager's best friend. And they just want to take a template that already exists and just slam it out. And the objective is to be done with the activity, not to write a precise, focused description of what that one job is going to be requiring.
Just hold it. I see a lot of people's heads nodding. Do you guys have to write jobs? How many people here have had to write a job description? Oh, good. We'll get back to you all. Go ahead.
And so, although it does take more time to craft something that's meaningful for that one particular position, I think that we do a disservice to both the candidates we're trying to attract and the positions we're trying to fill by just going through that hasty exercise of just repurposing something that already existed before, whereas the jobs often are a palette of buzzwords where if the candidate got the what's in it for me, why should I care, why do I want to go check this company out, because a job description is a set of activities and buzzwords, whereas you're accepting opportunity at a company. So I think job descriptions that really speak to you are things that tell you why you want to go talk to this company, because you're accepting the job, an opportunity at a company, not just this job description.
So let me just, and I'll get to you in a second. So let me just, so we, on one hand, we've said that job descriptions are bullshit, and then we've had the other thing that says we should find a job description that responds to us. So how does somebody make sense of that?
So here's the way that we've looked at job descriptions in the past, and I think that this is going to make.
Who's we?
I'm on the Akamai adversarial.
Akamai. Okay, so we have a home. We have triangulation here. Go ahead.
One team at Akamai, so I can't speak for everyone.
Okay, with the disclaimer is out. It's good. You won't get fired. If not, Linda will hire you, so don't worry about it.
Here's the way we've looked at it in the past. A job description is a program that has to be interpreted by two different interpreters simultaneously. It's a program that you're writing that's simultaneously in HR recruiter code and candidate code. So you're passing it to HR as a filter on incoming.
You say HR with so much disdain. Linda was a software engineer. She'll kick your ass.
Greatest respect for what HR does.
Really?
When they're doing
Really?
Like to hear.
No, let me finish that.
Well, we could take them, Linda.
What they're doing is looking at incoming resumes, and they're taking our job description as a filter on incoming resumes. Does this match the basic qualifications that we're looking for? But it's also a program that's being determined by the candidate. Do I have these qualifications? Do I have what it takes to succeed in this job? So if you're making your qualifications too tight, people might not apply, and the incoming resumes that you might otherwise want are going to get filtered by HR. On the other hand, if you make it too loose, you get a lot of people who are applying for the job who are frankly not qualified for it. So it's a difficult.
Holy conundrum, Batman.
method has been simply to go to the HR team that's doing the recruiting, give them the resumes of some people who are on the team right now, and say, does this match the net that you're going to cast right now? And if not, maybe we need a little bit wider net. I'll accept extra resumes. I'll take a look at extra resumes, the ones that I can filter out myself, simply because very few people come to the straight and narrow path to information security. Everybody comes through different ways. We've got one biologist, we've got a chemical engineer, we've got people from all over the world.
Sam Curry,
Anthropologists who just joined, all sorts of stuff.
So, I know Linda wants to talk, so I want you to go.
So with regard to job description, you do have a valid point. Yes, you do have to satisfy those that are in HR that may not have, if you're looking for a technical person, the technical skill set in order to do a proper screening, but you also do want to make the position itself attractive. So what do? You have the overall general, then you have specific information about why your particular particular group is so cool. And then you might have some general information about why your location is so cool, whether it's specific to living in the Boston area, of course, amazingly cool, or specific to your site and location and what facilities that you have available to your employees. And then it's the key, really the job description, right? What are you looking for? What do you want that person to do? And what are some crucial skills that you're looking for? So when I speak with managers, I say, really, what do you want this person to do? What is key that you're looking for? So from an applicant standpoint, very often when we're seeking out resumes and we're looking at candidates' profiles, we're seeing what's directly transferable. And I find that more often than not when you're dealing with resumes, they might be a little bit too generic and not really specifically oriented towards the task or position that they're looking to apply for. So that really you should have more than one version. And your resume should be oriented towards that one job description and how you're going to make a difference. It shouldn't be me, me, me. It's what can I give you?
So what Linda's saying is that we should social engineer the interview process. Because if that's what's happening is that, because the thing that's interesting, the one thing that I picked up on, and I'll get to you for a second, the one thing I picked up on that I find very interesting is that it's this reliance on the resume. All of a sudden, instead of being information security professionals, now when we put on our hiring hat, we're professional resume interpreters. Now, is that really possible? Because that would almost be like you telling me to go hack something. Because that's illogical. Like what I've learned over the course of time is that, people have 8 million different opinions on how to put together a resume. And if the entire goal of an interview process is to get through the gatekeeper, then the best answer possible is to write new resumes for every job description, because you will tailor everything to get through the gatekeeper to have your day in the sun. Go ahead, Linda.
But what you're saying is that it's only through resume applications. What we're not adding to it are going to events like this, where you're allowed to give yourself an opportunity to become that multidimensional person, not that two-dimensional resume. So there's your opportunity to introduce yourself, to let the company know why you are so amazing and why we need to hire you, so that we can say, hey, I just met this person and you need to interview that person. That has nothing to do with your resume. That has everything to do with who you are as an individual. Which
I completely agree with, but you know what? How many hours does everybody work here a week? I mean, and count commute too. How many people work more than 40 hours a week? How many people work more than 50 hours a week? How many people work around 60 hours a week or more? So between 50 hours a week, right? Then you want them to come out on their free time to interact with people with the sense of hoping to find interaction.
I'm saying capitalize on all of your opportunities. So there's social media, there's LinkedIn concepts, there's ways to introduce yourself to individuals that aren't just...
There are all those drunk photos on that Facebook page.
Yeah, I don't know Facebook, but LinkedIn I do use on a regular basis. And you would be surprised at how often I receive information from executives, management, consulting, all different avenues of our company that says, Linda, I met this person on LinkedIn, maybe we can utilize this person, can you take a look? So it's a business tool that you should take advantage of and use, and a lot of times people don't use that. So one avenue of sending a resume, if that's what you're putting your hopes and dreams on, then you're limiting yourself. So if you're aggressively out there seeking a new position, then you should use the multiple avenues that are available.
So that's a good question for both of you. How do you guys look at LinkedIn versus resumes?
Well, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I received an email this morning from a candidate who's graduating from Northeast with his master's, found me and sent me an email, and it just so happens I am looking to fill an entry-level Java developer position, and I got back to him and said, okay, I'll call you. I'm a little busy this week, but I will call you. I have hired people out of technical user groups that we host. Now, again, as Lee mentioned, it does take time. I mean, after you work your 50 hours, you're left with 118 for the rest of do everything else.
That's pretty good math. But here's, and I'll let you train your train of thought, but here's the interesting thing. Most of these people don't want the job that they already have. If they're like the lead engineer, they want to be the manager. If they're the manager, they want to be the director. If they're the director, they want to be the vice president. If they're the vice president, they want to be the CSO. The CSO, they want to run the company. So using your resume and your LinkedIn to get the job that you already have, I see as a very easy thing. My question to you is that since these people aren't generally actively seeking employment, there might be actively seeking better employment or better opportunity or more money. How does a person convey that? Not the kid who's just graduating saying, oh shit, I got $100,000 worth of debt, I got to pay this off somehow, but the person that says, look, you know what, I'm kicking ass where I am. The person above me is a little bit better than me, I'll be honest. I'm just maybe got passed over for something. How do I get, how am I as an assistant coach become the head coach of some other company?
Well, when we say use LinkedIn, there's many different ways to use LinkedIn. And this kid happened to go directly, to me. But the way you do something like that, especially is if, let's say, you're a principal level person, you want to get your first manager, you would find somebody who has a job like that, and then get an introduction from somebody who's in your network connected to that individual. That way, you inherit the credibility of the person saying, "Hey, I know this guy hasn't done management before. He's ready to step up. He's worth the conversation." And so you can leverage the social network, but also the influence of others in your network, so you don't have to just go and make a cold contact yourself, which is not a comfortable thing for most people who use technology to make a living. But that's something I strongly encourage, because how many times have you ever gotten an interview for somebody by just handing a resume to someone who trusted your opinion?
I say forget resumes. I just say forget them. Because quite frankly, yeah, it's the currency, but it's, you're hearing from folks here who do this for a living that the resume is really kind of like, and after the fact, it's like a small component to the puzzle. And they're basically saying that you need to focus on other avenues in doing that and other ways of, quote unquote, marketing yourself. I guess, here's just a question, forgetting about the, and just feeding off this. If somebody was to come in as a quote-unquote principal engineer and they apply to a manager job in one of your, whatever the title is, I don't care about the title, but they're applying for one step up and they've never done that before. Could you tell them what the likelihood of them getting their first promotion through a blind resume or a response to a job posting?
Almost zero. Almost zero. Because through the conventional, when you apply to Jobs Act, all right, it's going to be in a stack of other resumes, qualified, unqualified, and everything in between. And the amount of time it takes to read through every individual resume is daunting. And when you have somebody who doesn't look like their resume is used to write the job description, but you're trying to go up a level, it's almost impossible to do it by just going in and applying directly.
How do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I want to add, I think time has certainly changed big time. Is that the effectiveness of a resume has really worn off, because especially in this business, a lot of people have, it's almost like a dime in a dozen. First of all, a resume is a dime in a dozen. But the second thing is, it does not tell the whole story, especially if you're in this business where what you have, what you can do, your hands-on skills, is definitely something that it's not going to be shown on a resume.
So I think to turn that around, it would be to say, what makes you feel that you would be a good manager? You're a principal level person. What have you done from a learning standpoint? What additional courses, what motivations have you taken in your own accord that would make you qualified for a management role? Did you go for your MBA? Did you mentor a new grad that came on board and started showing leadership skills, although you weren't compensated for them, but just to gain that working knowledge so that you can actually apply it at a larger scale somewhere else? So the key is maybe you don't have the title, but you've done the job. Does that make sense?
See that?
So that gives you more relevance. I want someone who's led a team of 3 people, who knows how to get it done, who can work with multicultural environments, who work with different scenarios, whatever that is. Have you done that yet? Have you done that within your own company? Have you taken the initiative to say, we have a new guy coming on board, let me put him under my wing, I'll teach him. So that you start gaining the skills that's required in order to do that job on a competent level.
So that's an interesting point, because I think that partially what Linda is telling you is that if you're working internally in a company, and stop me if I'm misinterpreting, if you're working internally in the company, if you wanted to be promoted and you wanted to move up levels, what you truly need to do is you need to find opportunities within the walls of your company to absorb that responsibility so that you can showcase your talents to somebody or people who matter. And then when that promotion comes up or that opportunity comes up, instead of saying, let's go outside and post the position, they say, look, you know what? Susan's done a great job over here before. She's really doing the job. I know she's interested in becoming a manager. We should interview her first because she's invested time in our company and got there. Am I good there?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, the trick of that is, right? So what that really is saying is that in order to continue to progress your career upward, if that's the direction you want to head, you have to look inwardly to your company to be able to build those skills. So when it's time for you to look externally, instead of saying, well, I led this team of 3 people and I did this and I did that, but you weren't a manager. Did you really manage people or did you just lead them? Because on the outside, if you were coming in, your resume, as Mark said, would get lost if you weren't a manager. But because you were able to achieve that title or whatever, those responsibilities of manager, now when you apply, you are now not a principal, you are a manager. And that person might get some consideration. Is that fair? Do you guys see where that comes? Because many people call my office and they're calling us up about, I'm ready for the next step in my career. And the truth is that people aren't going to promote people that they don't know. They're not going to, because people aren't going to roll the dice on their own careers by making crappy hiring decisions. Because that's how they got to be managers. All right. Rob and then Carol.
Just to add a little bit of flavor, as someone who's hired and interviewed a lot of people, I'm not in HR, but I started my own business and hired a lot of people. If I get to the point where I'm looking at blind resumes, I feel like I'm failed in a lot of ways because I much prefer to hire from my network people that I actually know. And that's generally what I always tell people is if you're wondering why you're throwing out resumes and not getting responses, because there's another way to do this. You know, you actually having interaction with somebody like at a conference or an event where people actually attend and, you know, you get to meet the people that are actually making decisions. That's so much more powerful.
We actually had a most recent hire was a student coming right out of college because he went up and introduced himself to Tom Heiser at a speech that he was given.
Was it through a snowstorm?
It wasn't through a snowstorm that time, but I'll tell you, it's because that person did something uniquely different. So think to yourself, what are you doing uniquely different that's making you a standout? Within our company, all of our employees have opportunities to have mentors. And your mentor typically is not within your group, but within another group within the company where you sit and you work on your professional growth and career within EMC, within yourself, within RSA. We also have situations where movement within the company is encouraged. Happens all the time. We were just talking about a coworker of ours, a friend of his and a coworker of mine. She was with RSA. Now she's moved into a higher level position within EMC. And that's always considered a good thing. So you really have to think about what opportunities are there before you. What are you doing to get educated? What are you doing to connect with others who have the job that you want?
Carol?
As a director of content people, my team has very specific writing and technical abilities that aren't necessarily common. But I've had, as we said, other teams have support people, QA people, or sometimes the people on my team. And it's tough to sometimes you say, I'm not the greatest writer. Okay, well, what can you do? You know, can you explain it to my team so we can, what are you going to do? And the best people I brought in are the ones who
every big company.
Every big company.
Okay, let's not forget big.
I worked for a 15-person company that half the company was second floor, and everybody in the second floor was on to other teams. So we're a small little club.
But they don't have systems at a small company. That's a big deal. They have systems at...
Official or unofficial is type where someone grows up out of that role, stays there for like a year or so, and then moves to the rest of the company.
Oh, okay.
Sales associate program is a very common program where that takes place. We also have leadership programs from a new grad hiring. We have leadership programs in every area of our business, from HR, marketing, sales, engineering, both engineering for data analytics, security, as well as storage. So we have feeder pools that start at the graduate level, and they continue to move on. They're in that program for 2 years, and now you have a 2 or 3 year experienced person who's touched multiple departments, who knows the culture from a more omnipresent view, and they're very successful.
If we were at a conference where all the attendees were between 20 and 25, then I think that that's a very appropriate statement. But I'm thinking that this room is more of a, anywhere between 5 and 20 years in their careers. So, like, all those things are really great. Like, if you have a kid graduating college, but like, chances are, when you start dealing at these levels, when you start people actually have a career as a security professional, you're dealing with much different criteria, and you're dealing with a whole slew of different variables. One point that was just brought up in this was the concept of differentiation. I think Linda brought it up, but in most scenarios, any good job, like in searches that I get called on, like when we do a CISO, they don't just say, well, send me one person. They don't do that. They say, like, we might start with a field of, like, say, 30. Like, we just did the CISO search at Mayo Clinic, right? Pretty big job. We started with a field of about 30, and we narrowed it down, and then we narrow it down, and we narrow it down, and then, we find exactly what they want. But that's a big short. The thing is this, is that the 5 final candidates for that job were all winners. They just picked the one that was the best winner for them. So one of the things that, maybe I'll throw it out to the room and then give it back to the panel, but what are the things that you guys think will differentiate yourself? Because there's a huge difference between being Miss America and Miss Congeniality in the employment game. So any thoughts on that? Any thoughts on how you differentiate yourselves from your peers? Carol?
They did something on their own time. They got involved with the security organization, the volunteer specialist, and one of my guys was second charity. That shows genuine interest and willingness to put their own time into something without necessarily getting compensated. Something I don't like to hear is somebody competing saying, how much vacation time is there?
What's your policy on Columbus Day? Huh?
People would do their homework. Any person who comes in and says, by the way, this is the information about your site that I found out yesterday when I was doing our research, and by the way, this is what the stock price currently is.
It's possible that we're doing that.
Personally.
Yeah, I have. We had one guy come in with files on all of us on his iPad.
That's someone I learned.
It wasn't in a good way though. He was like, oh yeah, I have 50% about your family.
Well, Lee, I saw you 5 years ago, and there's something that there's so many things I took away from your talk 5 years ago. One other thing is that the interview is just a confirmation of what the interviewer knows about you already. I think as we've gotten to a time where we got the Facebook, the LinkedIn, and the Twitter, it's so easy to find information on people. I mean, it's out there. So if you can do the research on people, I know that there may be a perception that it's creepy, but it's called normal now, and that is expected. I think that the job interview itself is just just a confirmation of what people already know about each other.
I think another piece to that, thank you. Another piece to that would be your ability to think. So more often than not, I'm seeing that managers, especially on the technical end, are looking to see, because paper says so much about you, and sometimes people elaborate, and some don't say enough. So very often when you're going through the interviewing process and you're interviewing for a technical position, they're going to give you a problem that they want to watch you solve. And you may not solve it in the interview time that you have, so you need to be prepared. They want to see how you think, how you deduce information, how do you break it down, what's the process by which you're coming to your conclusion.
Long division. Showing your long division.
It's all on a whiteboard, and that's what they're learning. So make sure that the information that you have on your profile is actually true, and then you can back it up. Because especially for a technical role, they're going to test you on that, and you should be prepared for that.
To dovetail on what Linda just said, a lot of times people have the... Do you have a question?
No, I got it, Max.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
They wanted to include all the different technologies to which they've been exposed, but there are sometimes that can really bite you in the backside when someone puts it on the resume. They say, okay, this is fair game. I'm going to drill down the bone on this one. You better be ready. So be careful of what you put on your resume unless you're prepared to talk about it in detail.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, Mark.
Yep.
And it really bothers me when people put an alphabet soup of not certification but technologies like iOS, Android, because there's an old saying that it's much better to have one really, really sharp knife than to have a bunch of knives that are just not sharp.
Right.
And that becomes dangerous.
Unless someone's hiring you.
You see, there's the problem, right? We have one example, and we have 4 or 5 different perspectives, so how the hell can you figure it out? It's impossible, because you can't please everybody. So hold on a second. Gentleman in the blue sweater.
Yes, next to vacation count. We all care about benefits and vacation, so when is a good time to pick that up?
Okay, good.
You said earlier about different points that where we are in our careers. You know, if you're not a young person, you've been working for 10 or 15 years, you know, all that stuff is very relevant, right? So when's a good time to...
Well, I would focus on that when it seems more apparent that there's a good fit for both sides. You know, everyone gets a good sense after one interview of whether or not there was a real connection, okay? Because if you're bombing the technical interview, how many weeks vacation they offer is rather moot, right? Even the compensation. I mean, obviously you want to make sure there's a huge disconnect that you find out at the end. But don't worry about the benefits until it appears there's a fairly good probability that there's going to be an offer discussion to happen.
I'm going to interrupt one thing.
Yep.
If something to you is a deal breaker, at any point in time, you should raise that at a point where your time investment is going to become worth it. So, like, I'll give you an example. This is completely off the cuff. I have a client, for anonymity, it's in New York City. Anyhow, they're hiring somebody in a place completely outside of where they're normally operating. Their benefits program doesn't provide great coverage for this part of the country where they are. It's a boutique-y type of a place. The candidate said up front and said, look, I have a child, has some very unique medical needs. I need specific insurance. And if the company doesn't have that insurance, we shouldn't even start the process. And you know what? That was like a very valid thing. And you do a little due diligence up front with that, and you get that taken care of. I'll give you a complete flip, right? Something completely different. Candidate wants with a drunk driving arrest. Perfect model citizen except for this one transgression. She said to me, she said, look, before we go in, I want you to know that if they run a background check, they're going to find this on my background, and I want to be upfront about it. It's a big thing. I'm not proud of it. I'll talk about it, but I want to let that out there. So by clearing some of those hurdles at somewhat of an early stage, maybe after the first date, maybe after you've had a phone conversation, that's probably a good time. Because a phone conversation is not that big of an investment. People aren't really clearing their calendars too much. But as soon as you're starting to take days off of work and other people are really allocating their time to evaluate you, I think that if something is that important to you, commute, work from home, I mean, whatever, you know who you are as a person, as long as you're willing to accept that as a deal breaker and know that the employer can stop the process based upon what you've articulated, you know, that's good. The worst thing is to spring that on them at the end of the process. That's the worst.
At some point, you should, at some point you should be speaking to an HR rep. So my response to that would also be know your audience. So that question with regard to benefits, all benefits, and you can ask that question of where can I, or if you haven't done it already, you might be able to find their benefits information online without even having to ask that question. So that would be your first point of research that I would recommend that you do. But once it comes to the point where it looks like this is going to be a longer term relationship, not a quick date, that's when you want to make sure that you say, you know, when you speak to a human resources, know who you're speaking with, know who you're interviewing with, and say, can you give me information regarding your your overall benefits package? She will give you that, or he will give you that information in a general scope, where you can then say, oh, that's interesting. Is this something that's a part of the negotiation? Let's say there's 3 weeks, you're looking for 4 weeks, you already currently have whatever. So the time for that is with your human resources rep versus your manager who's interviewing you for a different set of skills. And you can ask open-ended general questions that might include the answer that you're looking for.
It's generally easy to get something that you already have if it's not that far of a departure. Like if you have 3 weeks, they offer 2, you can generally get 3. If you have 5 weeks, they offer 2, you might get 3, you're never getting 5.
Just back on resumes for a moment. You mentioned making sure you have all the relevant technologies, but not too many technologies.
That's batshit crazy. You can't figure that out.
Well, the thing is, I think anyone in here who's applied for a job has like the SEO section of their resume, like the shameless, oh God, I apologize, but I'm really good at Microsoft Word, you know, like it would suck to get passed over for a job because I didn't clarify that I can deal with Microsoft. You know, and that's something that you just used to think that it would happen, but you can see it happening. And I think we just
Let me ask you a question. You really want that job? I mean, you really want that job?
I don't know Microsoft offers.
Yeah,
That's kind of
that would never be a
No,
knockout.
it's batshit crazy. I mean,
the example behind it says,
there's no answer to your question. It's an infinite loop.
sure, a more relevant one though is like CASSP, yes or no, and that becomes a checklist look over, and you miss out on lots of good candidates.
Look, that's a whole nother session. So, go ahead. We only have we have spillover time for more questions. So the session ends at 3:30. So maybe they'll stop recording, but I know that we'll stay as long. I mean, it's designed this way, so you know, feel free to get up and leave, but feel free to stay and answer as many questions as you want to. But
I'm curious about the screening process. So let's say that a candidate is favorable and you're interested. So what role does, like, we talked about LinkedIn, but what about Facebook? Facebook or either positive or flat?
So that's an excellent question. I deal with students, a tremendous amount of students. I manage the co-op and internship program for RSA and another division, our Unified Storage Division. I do not screen out Facebook. However, people do. It happens. Whether it's for us, that's not relevant to me in terms of what I want to look at your business LinkedIn. I absolutely will look at that, but I will not look at your Facebook. You should Google yourself. You should check your Facebook. And if it's not something that you don't want your grandparent, your preacher, your neighbor, or your children to see, my recommendation is take it off. The internet is the internet, and there's full disclosure out there, and it's very easy to get a lot of information on you. But you should absolutely make sure that what you're putting on there is something that you would be proud of. So be prepared to clean that up. And I actually give an information session on students as to some of the things that they should really make sure is clean.
So following up on the get the promotion before you make the move, discussion we had earlier, I've actually been kind of in a trap for the last 5 years. Right?
wow, that must be some powerful trap.
So here's what happens is I've made some moves, and professionally I've grown a lot. And every time I do an interview, someone says, you know what, you really need to be running a team now. Less of the direct technical skills, more of the team management. Well, that's great, except that every time I make a move, I watch and I wait. It's just not happening.
So here's the key words that you said. I watch and I wait. Why? Why are you not doing and asking? So my recommendation to you would be the first thing is go to your manager and say, this is something that I want to build on my personal skills, or it's my professional goal. And part of your professional goal and conversations that you have with regard to your review and how you grow as an employee and as a professional is having that personal professional growth in your profile. So working with your manager and saying, I really want to have an opportunity to try and start leading other employees. How do we make this happen? And work with your manager on doing that.
Do you work at a corporate like security program and you're like a team of one? Is that it?
No, I work on a product development.
Okay. And you have...
So we consult various projects.
I got you. So you're like a shared services. You're the security resource. You overlay. And it's when you say we, is it you and...
Well,
or you are the we?
And I bid, so I have people who fulfill the services that I bid for, but they're not my employees.
Ah, so in other words, like you have to lead by leverage and influence.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's that's an organizational structure scenario. Like one of the things I would make the suggestion is that maybe you can ask, maybe what you can do is to try to figure out a way to maybe get into the business of, in other words, instead of being the deliverer, being the purchaser. Does that make sense? Where, in other words, instead of being, it might be a different role, it might be where security becomes a portion of the role, but then the leadership and the management of the group, like you might have to kind of move laterally within that organization to do that, because you just don't have, structurally in your organization, it's not set up for you to have direct reports, and you need an organizational seismic shift to actually have that opportunity even become made available. Does that make sense?
It does. I worry a little bit because if I do that, then I have a lot less leverage to draw from and tell you.
Oh, I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying is that if that's what you want to do, if you ask like how you would go and solve that problem. See, the thing is this, if you go and try that and it doesn't work, your skills aren't going to miraculously leave your body. In other words, your skills have value beyond the walls of your current company. It's like I like to use baseball analogies. It's like a baseball player who's playing in AAA. They're not just trying out for the Red Sox. They're trying out for all 30 Major League Baseball teams because they're an asset and they can be traded. So you have market value beyond the walls of your company. The market is not just your company. Your company becomes the market that is your market today, but the market for somebody's skills is the entire competitive matrix. So if you're not getting it where you are, there are certain ways that you can do to communicate to your boss about things that are important to you, because I'm sure they value you as a resource if they kept you in this prison for 5 years. So they're not just letting you go, right? So think about it in some of their terms. What do you want to know?
How do I do it?
Yeah, no. So why don't they tell you? That's a great question.
Okay, so most established companies come up with salary structure, salary grades from a different couple of perspectives. They use external market data, whereby they subscribe to services where everyone self-reports. We pay these people doing this job at this industry level, in this company sector, at this size, in this geography, and they come up with averages, low, median, and high. Okay, and then they look at internal equity, which is like, who do we have on our team right now who's at this level, and what are we paying them, and what is this candidate most closely a comparison to? Now, the dynamic here is that the market can change, and you have someone who accepted a job 8 years ago and is still there, is an internal equity drag on new people coming in. That's going to exist at any place that has long-term constituencies. But for the most part, a company is going to try to offer you a salary that's in line with both the internal equity and the external market data. There's always going to be outliers, but what the thing I've seen most consistently is people go do their research. They go on Salary.com and Glassdoor, and they talk to their friend.
Yeah, that's all the salary door and the glass. I mean, you have to really take that stuff, like all those web-based salary stuff is completely, in my mind, is not applicable to any one individual. Organizations, like a big organization like EMC or Akamai, they pay a lot of money to third-party firms that assess market data, just like a Gartner would do a Magic Quadrant, where they start designing compensation ranges, stop me if I'm wrong, that there becomes like a low point, a high point, and a midpoint. When these companies hire, stop me anytime, they like to hire people basically at or around the midpoint, give it like anywhere between 2 and 5%. So
exactly right.
Some of the things that they will do, now, there's certain things that will factor that. Obviously, their internal equity and the people that they currently have. That's how they get those numbers. But they also might think about how big the problem that they have. You might have to be one of 4 or 5 people that they're seeing that are in the same price range. So their market data might lag, but they'd have to get more of the general consensus of like, what is the true market for this particular skill that I've outlined in my job description that all my people like. And then what happens is this, is that you might get a group of candidates that might be 3 or 4 for a very hard to find position. And then what they'll do, another baseball example, is that they're going to moneyball it. And what they're going to do is they're going to say, I can have the best candidate that solves my problem, but we'll have to pay them X. Or I can have somebody that has some growth and we're going to have to take a little bit of a gamble, and we could pay them X minus 20, and it might be at the midpoint. Or they might decide to take something in the middle that they can really kind of agree to and start charting candidates that way. Is that kind of how it goes down?
Yep.
I also want it depends on the value added that you're bringing, right? So always think about, I want more money, I want more money. You want to think, this is the value I bring that justifies the cost increase. So when you're going through salary negotiation, you should really know the skill set that you offer, how much it's in demand. If they're interviewing 5 people just like you, you're less likely to have negotiating room. They'll just say, thank you so much for the time and interview, and we'll just hire the second guy. And that happens. So it's a delicate balance, and always remember that the value that you bring is what your dollar value should equate to. So it's the skill set level that you're bringing and how the value that we need it. Why is it in our best interest as a company to hire you? I'm
going to jump on that for a second, right? Because quite frankly, I think candidates have a lot more leverage than they give themselves credit for. There's nobody coming into the room after this. So we're good till people leave. Anybody wants to leave. You could have left anyway. But so the thing is this, is that you as a candidate have leverage. But you have leverage if you can justify and support it. Also, you as an employee have leverage too. Now, one of the best things, like people always say, is that like, they'll say like, well, I'm going to see if I get a counter offer, or I'm going to see if, I'm going to go take this offer and give it to my employee and my employer, and then they're going to pay me more money because they're going to see what, they're going to be, your behavior and how you handle that process is probably more important. If you really want to see what's out there in the market, the only way you could truly see how your skills are valued is this. You either have a peer group of people who are kind of like in your position at like companies in the same geography that you can speak openly with about compensation. The other thing that you can do is you could actually go out there and interview for things that, not for the next job, but interview for your current job. Interview for the job that you have, just at different companies. So if you're at, I'll use New York because it's easy for me, but if you're at Goldman Sachs, go out and interview at Morgan Stanley, interview at a couple hedge funds, interview at Citigroup. Go out and you'll get the market segment of what your skill works for in those environments. At that point in time, you could say, look, You have your next salary review with your boss and say, look, I just want you to know is I'm not looking, but I've been called from recruiters left and right for these types of roles. They're the exact role that I'm doing. This is what these jobs are paying out in the market. I like working here. I'm not telling you I'm going to go, but I'm just letting you know I'm doing your market intelligence for you. And I'd like for you guys to consider this when you have my next raise. So it's indirectly telling them, hey, look, I'm not holding a gun to your head, but I'm willing to. So it's basically creating that open relationship with your man, because in a perfect world you don't want to leave, and in a perfect world your manager doesn't want to lose you. So most people look at that and say, wow, what is my manager going to think if I do this? They're not going to like me, they're going to hate me. No, they're going to respect you. They're going to respect you because you're doing it professionally. You're not putting them in a bad situation where you back them into a corner. Because if you back them into the corner, they're going to tell you to leave. I don't care how valuable you are, but they're going to find that other person who's pushing for your opportunity and say, look, you know what? We have 4 other people who want to do your job. You want to go work at Citigroup? Go right to hell and do it. That's what they're going to do. So
the other piece to that is be very leery of a situation where they're going to pay you way beyond what your value is.
That's a good
So
point.
what is the company's situation that they're willing to go so high for your skill set? Are they having attrition problems? Are they losing customers? Really know the company that you're interviewing for. And if you see that you're receiving an offer that's way beyond the scope of what may seem too good to be true, it just might be too good to be true. Make sure you understand the culture and the environment, and that it's the right place for you to go beyond just the money. That's just something that you should always keep in mind. If you're in it just for the money, then sales is definitely where you should be. But
if you're in it just for the money, go work as a 1099.
Yeah, be a consultant.
I mean, be a consultant. Those guys, they have no career path. They have to invest in themselves, and there's nothing wrong with it. But you will make more money. You will live with more indecision. But you know what, though? You'll own your own time, and you'll be responsible for your own negotiation.
And to dovetail on what Linda said, in this, when the counteroffer thing came up, the counteroffer is like career suicide. I mean, I've seen a number of stats. Roughly 83% of people who accept counteroffers are not there 6 months later. Okay, so if you want to finesse your way into getting more money by going out and get a counteroffer, it's just like Lee says, you are putting a gun barrel to your boss's head, and they're not going to appreciate that very much. All right.
Neither will the company that you interviewed with for wasting their time.
Right.
Carol?
So,
Yes, I just wanted to take into account the increased salary. You also have to consider the value of growth, where you might take a lateral move over, or even maybe slightly less. But if there's more opportunity for you to grow and be in a position, that's got value.
Absolutely it does.
No, well, look, so I'm going to take a little bit of a different path and just offer a contrarian opinion on the concept of counteroffer, right? I don't like it either in my business, and there's probably nothing that I guess probably would bother me more, because you kind of feel that you're not getting a full story when you're interacting with somebody. But I never fault somebody for considering taking counteroffers, because I don't know their current work environment, and they know their current work environment. And they have that relationship with their boss. And at the end of the day, changing jobs is not it's an emotional decision as well. I don't think that you can have like a really good long-term trajectory in success in a current company if you're always looking for counter opportunities. But I think that the problem happens is that as people start to look, they don't give their employee left the job for a manager. You basically set up the smoke signals and the flags and said that. Now, if you walked in their office one day and said, look, you know what, I got this opportunity. I'm going to be in the final stages of an interview for a manager role. And they say, hey, I don't know your name, but hey, Hiram. Hey, Hiram, look, if if that's what's going to take for you to stay, then we'll figure that out. Now, you then have to evaluate, are they moving, are they doing that for you? Now, that's a completely different story. But that's really up for you to assess. So to give a blanket statement, because, I mean, quite frankly, in our business, in what we do, like, that's the worst, to think that, something's going to happen and you've built this internal trust with this person and people have been, expecting somebody to come and then they don't leave because of a counteroffer or because they decide to stay or they go take some other job. It's your career. You make the decisions, you reap the benefits, you suffer the consequences. So it's a huge responsibility. It's not any internal recruiter's responsibility. It's not an external recruiter's responsibility. It's not a hiring manager's responsibility. It's your own responsibility to manage your career. And one day or another, you will pay or you will benefit for how you act and how you behave during this facet of your career. So I just want you to all think about that, is that, you owe that to your responsibilities sit with your families, they sit with the people who truly care about you, and that could include your manager. But that's really where that sits. So, go ahead.
I've heard a couple conflicting ideas here.
Good.
Where
that's the thinking.
Well, it's been said, go out and see what the market's like. Go interview at places.
Yeah.
But then don't waste the future employer's time. Where do you find that balance between not wasting where you're interviewing, wasting their time, versus testing the waters or testing the market?
Let me ask you a question. Are you married? Okay. Before I got married, I'll make it so it's not painful, right? I dated different women before I decided to get married. I actually even got married once and decided that wasn't good, and then I dated other women before I got married again. So was all that dating a waste of time? No, because it helped me get to a point where I was able to make a decision. Now, were people hurt along the way? Me, them? Of course. But that's the same thing about it. There is an opportunity cost. And they accept it, and you accept it. Just like you can interview for something, they can say, wow, we want to hire you. You can say it's not the right place. You could go interview and say, like, I really want to work there. And they can say, we're not hiring you. So everybody understands the rules of the game beforehand. Just set your parameters so you know that if things did come down to the right scenario, you'd be in a place to say, like, this could work. You don't want to interview for jobs that require 50% travel if you're not willing to travel. That's a waste of time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But to add to that, very often when approaching a candidate who's not actually on the market, just say right up front, it's like, well, this is kind of an exploratory. And you set that up with the person who's going to be speaking to the candidate just to probe if there's more interest, and, get to the point where you are going to start getting a commitment from other people. So, I'm just kind of kicking the tires. I'm not ready to make a move, but I'm ready to listen. And as long as you're okay with this being an exploratory, and I might walk away, then I'm good with, with your participation in that. So as long as you put the cards on the table face up, there's no surprises for anybody.
But here's a good rule for you all. You should all be always in the exploratory phase. There's zero, and I'm not saying that, you should, interviewing should be a sport, but like if you have like a certain amount of vacation days, you should utilize, say, look, I'm going to probably allocate every year 3 or 4 days to interviewing, or whatever that number that works for you. Just because, quite frankly, is that you have to understand what's happening around you. And the only person that could really appreciate that perspective is yourself. Everybody has their own time. And, the interview process is very much set up where, you're going to dress up real nice, they're going to dress up real nice, and you're going to figure out if, we like each other. The only thing I say this is that if you decide to do that, be sincere about engaging. Don't be like, yeah, I got a call and I figured I'd just show up and see what you guys are doing, right? That's bad. So like, do your homework, understand the position, know what you're talking about. Make sure that you give it the respect that the people on the other side are giving it. And I think that's fair. Do scenario. Play hard.
Oh, I have a response for you on that. So I have a little story for you that I'll share. High executive, hands involved in many different things, finally decides it's time, I'm done, I'm going to retire. Now this was a very important person within the company, had a tremendous amount of responsibility and really was involved in multiple projects. And he gave a 1-month notice before he retired. In 1 week's time, his phone stopped ringing. Everyone is replaceable. So if you do your job well and you have a deadline of 3 months and you want to see that project through because it's important to you and it's for you, you want to see the project to completion, that's a personal decision. If it's a situation where you're thinking the company will fall without me, that's not true. It's just simply not true.
I don't think he's saying that though.
So
I think you're missing. What he's saying is this, is saying that if he gets approached by a company and he's like, let's say,
not available to start now.
and he's not, in other words, like he's in the middle of doing something that's really cool, he doesn't want to leave now, but like in 3 months he'd really love to explore this, how does he handle that situation?
I think honesty is always the best policy. It's always say, I'm jazzed about your company. I think you're doing some incredible work. I'm in the middle of a project right now where it will be complete July 1st. I'd love to come in and have a conversation with you now in the opportunity that would be a good opportunity for us to work with one another. The process itself could take the same amount of time as it takes for you to complete your project.
It's a good answer. A couple of years?
A couple of years, that's
like, I mean, a couple of years. I mean, a couple of years, the person's probably not going to be there in a couple of years. I mean, a couple of years, I mean.
It's like saying, do you want to get married on your first date?
See, it always comes back to dating. It always comes back to dating.
Really
but no, like a couple of years is like, that's like, I mean, I don't even know how to, like you can't really, like, you have to understand is that recruiting, the thing that's in recruiting is this. The company has an itch and it needs to be scratched. You happen to be the back scratcher. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, right? People hire because of need. Candidates get opportunity because of want. Successful recruiting is really the interaction of need and want. The candidate gets something that they want, the employer gets something that they need, and we agree to some sort of compensation for it, and that works. We have 5 minutes left. I want to hit the compensation thing one more time, right? All I tell people is this, is that, you know, one of the biggest questions when we engage a candidate with any of our clients, and I'm sure that they have same practices at Akamai and EMC, is that we ask the candidate, well, what are you currently earning? And sometimes candidates are a little bit nervous about, like, why should I answer that question? Why is that important? And the thing I always tell people is this, is that I never want to send the candidate into an opportunity where we can't afford to pay them. And the negotiation process, I think when you work with internal recruitment or external recruitment, begins at the presentation and the consent of saying, I'd like to interview for a job. Because what we do is that we start benchmarking and baselining compensation to know that if the hiring people want to end the process, that we're going to get to a certain point. I'll give you a great example of something that just really happened. It's true life, right? I have a client in New York. I have clients outside of New York, but this seems a lot in New York right now. But I have a client in New York. It was like a very senior technical security software architecture type candidate. The candidate says, look, I'm earning about $200,000 now. I like my job. I like being here. It would only be meaningful for me to take this job at $300,000 total comp. I said, okay, fine. We send the candidate in. This is the ground rule. The candidate goes through the interview process. He does well. Not great, but well. Best candidate that they've seen thus far. At the end of the process, they say to us, they're like, you know what? We can afford to pay the $300, but based upon the other people that were that we have in our company, we'd hire them no-brainer at $260, $270, just not at $3. Do you think the candidate would be interested? And then I said to the client, I said, the answer to that question is no. I'll ask the candidate once because out of courtesy, because you've all invested the time, but you guys understood the price point for the candidate. They made it very clear. You made your assessment, and now it's over. So you can either hire them at $3 or not hire them at $270. That's a pretty good problem to have, right? But anyhow, well, that job's still open. But anyhow, but no, seriously though. But level setting that is pretty important, and it might not be as big as numbers as 200 and 300, because like the concept was is that it would have been very hard to justify a 200 to 300. He's probably a 250 candidate in the open market in Manhattan, but you know what? He wanted a little bit more. There was a little bit of a premium on it. He said, look, for me to leave what I need to do, this is the cost of me changing jobs. And you know, he had leverage. And if you have leverage, the better skills that you have, you're like, anybody watch football? Like you're like Terrell Owens. Like as long as he's catching touchdown passes, and so, people put up with all that bullshit. But as soon as he just becomes an aggravation, then they don't want to pay him. They don't want to deal with all that stuff. So that's kind of how you have to look at yourself in some of these processes. It's like, you know, are you writing checks that your body can cash?
You should know your no number. You should know your bottom line number that you wouldn't be willing to look at anything at less than X. Does that make sense? So do your homework, get a feel for what you feel your value added is, and know what your bottom line no number is. Also know what your ultimate yes number is. And have that range in between. And that range in between could be opportunity to work from home or an extra week benefit or whatever. But have a range in mind so that you're going in with your homework done.
There's like a general rule that I tell people: when you're like early in your career, you should always be taking jobs for opportunity, exposure, and things like that. As you get into your career, you know, things that are more concrete, quality of life, money, titles, blah, 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 personal satisfaction, those things should kind of weigh a lot more. But when you're younger, I've seen people, you know, the right place job early on in the career can accelerate somebody's growth 5 or 10 years in a career. I've seen that through doing this through the course of time. I've seen it, you know, happen.